Welcome. I'm Keith Luce with NCNK. I'm pleased to welcome you to this meeting with Ken Gause and Anna Fifield. The topic, the women surrounding Kim Jong Un. This event will be recorded. You will have opportunity along the way to submit questions for either speaker to respond. Ken is an analyst and senior advisor of the North Korea program at the Institute of Defense Analysis. He holds an MA in Soviet and East European Studies from George Washington University and a BA in Political Science and Russian from Vanderbilt University. Before joining IDA, he was an analyst, research director, and director of the Adversary Analytics Program at the CNA Corporation. Before that, he was a research assistant at the Brookings Institution and Rand Corporation. After beginning his career as a Sovietologist, he shifted his focus to North Korea in 1988, and he is the author of numerous articles and several books on the North Korean leadership apparatus and the Kim family. Anna Fifield spent 8 years as a foreign correspondent covering North Korea for the Washington Post and the Financial Times. She visited North Korea a dozen times. Her book, The Great Successor, The Divinely Perfect Destiny of Brilliant Comrade Kim Jong Un, has been translated into 24 languages. For the past 3 years, she was the Washington Post Asia Pacific editor. She was a Nieman Journalism Fellow at Harvard University, studying how change happens in closed societies, and in 2018 won Stanford University's Shorenstein Prize for Excellence in Reporting on Asia. First, we will turn to Ken, and then Anna will follow. Ken, please proceed.
All right. Thank you for having me speaking at this forum here on a very interesting topic, I think. I think it's right at the heart of what we see going on inside North Korea, and I'll talk a bit about that. My talk will begin with a discussion of the Ninth Party Congress, then transition into a little bit of leadership politics, and then end up with the role of women around Kim Jong Un, because I think that there's some fundamental things going on inside North Korea, and many of these women are kind of at the heart of things. So the Ninth Party Congress in February of 2026 served as a critical platform for Kim Jong Un to codify a new era of sustainable institutionalization and generational leadership. It finalized a massive reshuffling of the power elite and elevated the strategic role of women to unprecedented heights, signaling a shift toward a family-centric normalized state to secure the regime's long-term future. So I'll touch on the systematic purging in this talk, touch on the systematic purging of the old guard to install a loyalist technocracy, the evolution of Kim's institutional leadership style that favors predictability over impulse, and the calculated ascent of elite women as the ultimate guardians of the Paektu bloodline. So when we begin in talking about the Ninth Party Congress, the Congress oversaw an unprecedented churn within the party's highest leadership bodies. There was a new class of generational allies tied to Kim Jong Un who rose up, and a lot of the old guard were kind of pushed to the side. So some examples of this. Within the executive presidium, and I'm not talking about the presidium of the Politburo here, I'm talking about the executive presidium of the Congress. We saw of the 39 members, these are the people that sit behind, on stage during a Congress. They're usually about 40 some odd people sitting in that on stage. Of the 39 people there, members of the Power Executive Presidium, 23, or approximately 59%, were replaced during the Ninth Party Congress. Many were sidelined. Many of those who were sidelined were long-standing power brokers around Kim. The Politburo. The Ninth Congress also elected a new Politburo, or the Workers' Party. The Presidium of the Politburo was switched out, with old guards being replaced by technocrats tied to issues of party control and military modernization. The Central Committee turnover was more than 40% were swapped out. The party secretariat was expanded to 11 members, emphasizing a shift toward professionalization and departmental rule within the party apparatus. Then we see something within this the Congress of overlapping and reducing circles of authority. There was an overlap between the Politburo. We see an overlap now between the Politburo Presidium, or we saw the Politburo Presidium and the Central Military Commission. The overlap there was actually reduced down to one of Kim Jong Un. This highlights a concentration of authority coming out of the Ninth Party Congress. There were a handful of members of the upper elite within North Korea that now occupy numerous positions. Some of them, as many as 4 positions within the Politburo, the Secretariat, the Central Committee departments, and the party inspection bodies. There was also a purging of the old guard, as I said, for loyalist technocracy. The deliberate removal of veteran partisan figures and mentors to eliminate competing power centers and install a culture of absolute institutional loyalty. There's a sidelining of the second generation. This is the generation around Kim Jong-il. People like Choe Son Hui was notably dropped from the Central Committee and subsequently removed from his legislative post. At the same time, we saw the institutionalization of a lot of close aides close to Kim Jong-un, key loyalists such as Yo Jong, previously the de facto second in command, and Hil-won, the Secretary of Propaganda and Agitation, retained their high-level positions. There was an elevation of younger officials and specialized technocrats. This reflects a move toward a more normalized bureaucracy and bureaucratic structure that prioritizes technical competence and direct allegiance over revolutionary pedigree. So this is a kind of a continuation of what we've seen over the last few Congresses, but it really was kind of culmination of here at the Ninth Party Congress. This sweeping reset was further validated in March of this year with the parliamentary elections, where over 70% of the 15th Supreme People's Assembly's deputies were replaced. Now, when we talk about the normalization of the state, which I think is what all of this is kind of leading toward, Kim Jong-un has transitioned from a guerrilla-style government of his father toward a model of normalized authoritarianism. This evolution prioritizes bureaucratic regularity and institutional predictability as a primary safeguards for the regime's long-term survival. We've really kind of seen this as a step-by-step process that has occurred really over the last decade or so, especially since the removal and execution of Choe Son Hui. So the hallmark of this style is the restoration of the party's formal calendar by strictly adhering to 5-year Congress cycles. Kim has moved away from an era of erratic on-the-spot decrees. This forces the bureaucracy to operate within a predictable framework of midterm planning. We see a lot more emphasis being put on planning at the second, third, and fourth echelons within the North Korean leadership, much more predictability. You have the increase in the delegated responsibilities, daily administration to the expanded 11-member secretariat and the specialized central committee departments in a way that that really, I think, began at the last party Congress and really has been kind of accelerated at the Ninth Party Congress. And this creates kind of a layer of institutional, kind of a buffer in which when policy failures occur, the blame is absorbed by the relevant department and technocrats, allowing Kim to maintain a normalized image of the supreme arbiter who intervenes to correct a malfunctioning system rather than dictating by rule or by whim. So in other words, Kim is kind of adjusting his leadership style here. He's going to intervene to kind of deal with particular issues of the way the system operates, but he's going to allow this kind of institutional technocratic layer to really kind of conduct the day-to-day operations of the regime. Strategic legibility. In the military and diplomatic spheres, Kim's preference for predictability has replaced surprise with calculated escalation. This makes North Korean provocations legible to the international community, or at least I think that's what he's trying to achieve here. Scheduled milestones in pre-announced technical plan on the development of his military systems, as opposed to just blindly throwing something out there at the spur of the moment and everybody kind of wondering why he did it at what time. I think you're going to see a little bit more predictability here. It doesn't mean that they're not going to do things that sometimes are meant for shock factor, but I'm saying it for the most part, the reforms that we're seeing in the military, the economic, is being more institutionalized. There's an installation of a loyalist technocracy that suggests that Kim values professional expertise as a tool for state stability. And this normalized leadership structure is designed to be resilient. It creates a machine that can sustain the regime's core interests even during periods of leadership absence, and that's critical. As long as the Kim family remains in power, the major threat to this regime is an unexpected death of the supreme leader. It's not outside pressure or anything like that. And so I think Kim is creating a system that can coalesce around his successor and really kind of conduct and carry out the day-to-day affairs without having too much of a hiccup. And thus ensuring that the Paek-2 system is robust enough to endure for generations. Now I'll talk a little bit about the women and their role within the leadership. The Ninth Party Congress served as a formal coronation of what I believe is a matriarchal inner circle where elite women have been positioned not as mere symbols, but as the primary functional guardians of the Kim family's survival. This calculated ascent represents a strategic pivot in a regime that has purged its veteran male regents, and Kim Jong Un has entrusted the most sensitive levers of power to women whose loyalty is biologically and existentially tied to him. So if we divide the responsibility amongst these women, this is kind of what I think it looks like. And again, this is my framework, my theory. I'm not saying that this is 100% true, but when I am looking at the system, when I'm talking to people who are very, astute watchers of the system and high-level defectors and things like that, this is kind of what I'm seeing. So the administrative iron grip, that belongs to Kim Yo Jong. The Congress codified Kim Yo Jong's transition from a high-profile messenger to a senior institutional administrator. Her appointment as the director of the General Affairs Department places her in control of the regime's nervous system, managing the flow of top-secret documents, the leader's schedule, and the vetting of party cadres. By institutionalizing her power, Kim Jong Un has created a familial gatekeeper system that ensures no non-kin official can bypass the bloodline to influence the center of power. Kim Yo Jong, for a while, has played the role of a gatekeeper within the regime. I wrote about this back in 2015 in my book, The North Korean House of Cards. It has now been much more formalized within the party system. And if you want to talk about the importance of the General Department, which I think is something that is not being looked at right now, but is hugely important to what is going on inside the North Korean regime, we can talk about that a little bit, because I think that that is being used as really, as I said, the nervous system, the head of the nervous system within the regime. The diplomatic shield. This belongs to Choe Son Hui. The elevation of Choe Son Hui to full Politburo membership and her continued tenure as foreign minister represents a professionalized face of this new guard. As the regime's most powerful non-kin woman, Choe provides a sophisticated, normalized diplomatic front. Her role is to manage the international community's perception of North Korea as a permanent nuclear power, providing the external stability necessary for the internal dynastic transition to take root. Third, the image architect. This belongs to Choe Son Hui, probably working with Kim Jong Un. This former pop star and current senior official, Yo Jong, manages the literal look of the regime. Often seen steps behind Kim Jong Un, Yon manages the minute-to-minute logistics of his public appearances, handling his speeches, and ensuring the leader's supreme dignity is virtually perfect. As a member of the Central Committee and a key figure of the propaganda apparatus, she is in charge of modernizing the North Korean state culture, making it more appealing to a younger generation while maintaining strict ideological control. Since the Ninth Party Congress, she maintains a trusted member of the inner circle, often photographed alongside Kim Yo Jong. Recent imagery from late February shows her actively assisting the leader in major military and party venues. The symbolic grooming. This is reference to Kim Jong-un. Perhaps the most significant outcome of the Ninth Congress was the virtual and political positioning of Kim Jong-un. Her constant presence at military and national ceremonies, often flanked by the nation's top generals, is a deliberate act of social engineering. By placing his daughter at the heart of the Paek-2 iconography, Kim is desensitizing the patriarchal elite to the idea of female succession. Her ascent is a signal that the future of the state is not tied to the military old guard, but to the eternal continuation of the bloodline. Now, of course, a male heir could pop out at any day, in the future, and all of a sudden this would all be turned on its head. But from what we're seeing right now in terms of how Kim Jong-un is being portrayed to the public, the North Korean public, as well as the North Korean elite, as well as the international community, it does lean in the direction that she is his hand-chosen successor. But I suspect that that formality of that choosing may not have occurred yet. Soft power within the regime. That belongs to Yi Sol-chu, the wife of Kim Jong-un. As First Lady, Yi Sol-chu's role is primarily to humanize the regime and project a socialist family image that suggests domestic stability. During events like the International Women's Day earlier this month, Yi has appeared alongside her daughter, Kim Jong-un, to reinforce the narrative that the state is a single household led by her husband. Unlike previous North Korean leaders' wives, she has a public-facing role, attending summits, military parades, and theater performances to project an image of a contemporary high-status leadership couple. She maintains a following amongst the wives of the North Korean elite, serving as a social bridge between the leader's family and the top tiers of the bureaucracy. And so in conclusion, the strategy of dynastic preservation is what we're looking at here. The rise of elite women suggests that Kim Jong-un views the matriarchal core as more reliable than a traditional male-dominated military hierarchy. Because these women's status is derived entirely from their proximity to the leader, they have no independent power base from which to challenge him. They are the ultimate keepers of the flame, designed to bridge the gap between the current leadership and the fourth generation, ensuring that the family-centric normalized state remains unassailable for decades to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. And as we turn to Anna, just a reminder that if you'd like to submit a question for either of our presenters, please do so through the Zoom Q&A function. And by the way, we do ask that attendees refrain from taking screenshots and or screen recordings of the program. Anna, we'll turn to you.
Thank you, Keith, and thank you, Ken, for that. And good morning, everybody. It's so nice to see so many old friends on this Zoom. I say good morning because I'm in New Zealand and it's already tomorrow here. But I'm delighted to be back with you today. I would say first up, to follow on from Ken's conversation there, that I think the rise of these various women in North Korea does not necessarily and does not signal a general improvement in women's position inside North Korea. They are not more broadly empowered, even as these women are and still remain in a difficult situation there. In fact, probably there has been some backsliding in the economic power of women in the past few years because of the way the Jangmadang markets have come under increasing state control since COVID. And so this area where women were able to exercise more independence and authority has been diminished since then. Just on that note, I have to put in a plug. Kathy Zellweger and Mike Chinoy have written a really great book, a memoir of Kathy's time traveling around to North Korea and the extraordinary access she got there. So let me highly recommend Kathy's book to you. So I would say the fact that these women who Ken has outlined have risen in North Korea is not due to the fact that they are necessarily women, but the fact that they are almost all of them family. They have these blood links to Kim Jong Un, or are otherwise, as in the case of Choe Son Hui, very well connected into the political networks and the elite inside North Korea. So these women are really the exceptions in North Korea rather than a sign of broader female empowerment across North Korea. To move to the women that Ken has outlined here, I think that this is very much about regime legitimacy, as is most things that Kim Jong Un does and oversees. And that in many ways, this is not new in North Korea, in that even Kim Jong-suk, the wife of Kim Il-sung, mother of Kim Jong-il, was similarly or was lionized in the North Korean propaganda as the mother of the revolution. She was made immortal by Kim Jong-il, elevated to that same status as Kim Il-sung during Kim Jong-il's time there. So there is some track record. There's some precedent for women, revolutionary family women, to hold this status in North Korea. But we have really seen a sharp acceleration of this under Kim Jong Un. As Ken outlined, the emergence of Ri Sol-ju as the wife, and as Ken said, the creation of a family-centric leadership. I think she has played a really distinct and important role, especially at the beginning when she came out. And she was not only was she visible in a way that North Korean leaders' wives had never been before, but she was a very different kind of first lady in North Korea. She was glamorous, she was young, she was affectionate, linking her arm through his in ways that's kind of almost scandalous in North Korea when they went out places. So she really helped in those early years for Kim Jong Un to present himself as a modern, millennial, new kind of leader, and to signal that that things in North Korea would be different under him. Plus the fact that she was a very well-known singer in North Korea would have made her instantly recognizable to most of the population. So in many ways, she was the Kate Middleton of North Korea through that period. I think it is, and just to move on to Kim Yo Jong at that time, the sister, her role was very distinct and very different. She is operational, she is functional. Like Ken said, she has been elevated to be in charge of the propaganda, the narrative, the espousing on policy towards South Korea and the United States, because she is trusted. She is Paekdu bloodline. She has the same incentive as Kim Jong Un to keep the regime in place. And I see her role as very different to Ri Sol-ju's. And she is really acting as a de facto leader in many ways. But I think the most interesting development of the past couple of years has been the way these two women, the sister and the wife, have been almost demoted in a way with the emergence of the dear daughter, Kim Joo-ae, and onto the scene, and just how extraordinary this is by anybody's standards, let alone in North Korean standards, to have a girl who was probably 10 years old at the time accompanying her father in such a prominent, public, celebrated way. Um, I have to say, I was wrong about Kim Jong Un. When he took over in 2011. I just thought there was no way that he would be able to keep a grip on the regime. This 27-year-old, very inexperienced leader who had been had his succession process really rushed through in a couple of years, as opposed to the decades that Kim Il Sung spent preparing Kim Jong Il to take over. Um, and then, when Kim Yo Jong emerged onto the scene, I couldn't imagine that she could possibly be the leader either, because of the fact that she was a woman. I didn't think that the regime in North Korea would be able to tolerate not just a young person, but a woman too. Um, I think now with not with Ri with Kim Joo-ae, it's very clear that this is about succession, that Kim Jong-un is circulating the idea of a fourth generation of Paektu leadership in North Korea. And the fact that she has been introduced at such an extraordinarily young age, probably about 10, she's probably about 13 or 14 now, maybe, just reinforces to me or makes me conclude that Kim Jong-un's succession process was even rockier than we had known at the time. Because if we remember, it was only after Kim Jong-il had his stroke in 2008 that Kim Jong-un emerged onto the stage in that extraordinary military photo where he was front and center with his father. And just the way that he was rushed up the ranks through the system and the legitimacy building that took place over a very compressed period of time, as opposed to the decades that Kim Jong-il spent working his way up the political and military apparatus. So the fact that Kim Jong-un has brought his daughter out at such an early age may be a reflection of the fact that she is female and this idea will take more circulating, but also the fact that that he is trying to prepare for a long, steady succession process. I would note that her first appearances on the scene were all very military related, and keeping with the way Kim Jong-un was introduced and with kind of military first policies there. And that over the years, we have seen her going from missile launches to the destroyer launches. We've seen her most recently this month or last month shooting sniper rifles, driving a tank in the same way that her father and grandfather had been pictured doing. So this, is the reason why I conclude that she is definitely being groomed as the next successor. But to build on what Ken said about the family-centric system, I do think that all of these appearances help portray this image of a loving family and a modern dad who's in there holding hands with his daughter, bringing her along, and that this is all about dynastic preservation. Ken mentioned the biggest risk to Kim Jong-un is unexpected death. And as we look at him, it's a constant wonder to me that he's not taking better care of himself, because he doesn't look in great shape. The South Korean intelligence services estimate he weighs more than 300 pounds, and he is constantly seen smoking. So the idea of an early death is not as far-fetched as it might otherwise be for a 40-something man. Whether Kim Joo-ae would be able to take over with Kim Yo Jong acting as a kind of regent in the same way that Jang Song-taek did with Kim Jong-un, we just don't know whether that would be feasible or possible. I am struck as I think about Kim Joo-ae by all the things we do not know about her, starting with her name. To this day, Dennis Rodman remains the source of her name via Michael Spavor, who was there on that trip where he held the baby. And just even remembering that the South Korean intelligence service was spelling Kim Jong Un's name wrong until the North Korean propaganda apparatus told us how to spell it. They were calling him Kim Jong Un instead of Kim Jong Un for the longest period. So we don't know her name. We don't know her age precisely. We don't know what kind of schooling she has had. And at this age that she's at now, 13 or so, Kim Jong Un was in Switzerland, and Kim Jong Nam too was in Switzerland, and the family was making an effort to give them some kind of semblance of normal life. And to give them some experience to enable them to have a childhood. So not only is Kim Jong Un not in Switzerland or anywhere else living a normal life, but she is a child of the COVID era. She grew up at home. So not only was she isolated by being a child of the regime, but we can assume that she, as all other children around the world, had to be socially distanced during COVID as well. So this is by no means, and like even by North Korean standards, I think this is not a normal childhood that she's having, not going to school as far as we know, and plus attending all of these military events. The other questions that stick in my mind, and maybe Ken actually might know the answer to this, is whatever happened to Kim Jong-hee, another prominent woman, Kim Jong Un's aunt, sister of Kim Jong-il, after her husband, Jang Song-taek, was executed. She disappeared for a number of years, but reappeared in 2020. So she is a member, she has the Pektu blood in her veins, who has not been seen since. It may be that she's died. She was born, she must be like 77 or so now, if she's still alive. But I'm interested to find out what happened to her. And if she has been sidelined, that is a sign that in this system still blood is not enough, that anybody can still be put onto the outs. So, in conclusion, I do see this system where Kim Jong Un is trying to modernize, is trying to look more like a normal state, is trying to promote his family, but chief of all, trying to ensure that the regime, which has defied all expectations, will be perpetuated for another generation, a fourth generation. And that is what Kim Jong-un is all about. So, with that, I will hand back to you, Keith. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Ken, feel free to respond to Anna's last question. And also, I would convey Mark Tokola's question to Ken. Could you define technocrat for us? Is a technocrat an expert in bureaucratic rules and processes, or a subject matter expert such as agronomists, economists, and engineers? Ken?
All right, as far as Kim Jong Hui is concerned, I mean, I've heard two rumors. One, that she's in a sanitarium north of Pyongyang. Second is that she passed away a while ago, but again, we've seen no evidence of that. The only time she would be trotted out over the last few years is if there was need to show cohesion within the Kim family, but that really hasn't been a need over the last few years. So she's pretty much been kept out of the picture in order to really kind of really emphasize the Kim Jong-un bloodline. Remember, she was a supporter of Kim Jong-nam as being the successor. She and Choe Son Hui were, and basically gave in to Kim Jong-il's decision in 2008, September, probably 2008, to choose Kim Jong-un as the official heir apparent, which then came out in 2010. So long and short of it, we don't know really where she's at. Probably, I would guess she's still up in a sanitarium being taken care of. And that's where she'll probably die. As far as technocrats concerned, largely it does mean people who have technical expertise, be it in economics, bureaucratic policy, military policy, so on and so forth. It has kind of expanded over the last couple of years to take on a kind of a role that is not only technical expert, but knows how to convey the literature, the issues of the day related to that particular portfolio within the bubble of Kim, where many of these people were identified and Kim started to develop relationships with them. We're in the Tuesday, Friday meetings that were held early on in Kim's tenure. The Tuesday meetings focusing on domestic policy and economics, the Friday meetings on national security and foreign policy. And that's where Kim started to develop these relationships with people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. And a lot of these people are now moving into key positions known as technocrats that are seen not as to be political players necessarily, but to be people who are competent in what they do. So.
All right, thank you. Anna, we have a question from Annika Culver, which I'll direct to you. She has a question about women's power as consumers, in particular, elite women who have created a market for cosmetics and luxury goods. How do elite women use consumption as a marker of their place in society?
That's a great question, Annika. I think a lot of this has been driven, first of all, by Ri Sol-ju and her appearance, her being much more modern and a millennial woman there has created this kind of, like I said, Kate Middleton style figure that people want to emulate. And she's showing that there is progress inside North Korea. I think this is driven in large part by the increasing exposure to media from the outside world, the fact that so many people in North Korea have now watched South Korean dramas and Chinese dramas as well, and seen the progress there, and that in a way it has been the Communist part has been put aside because Kim Jong Un wants to be able to show that North Korea is a normal country and is progressing as well. And he has allowed people who were once equally poor to, he's allowed people to become rich, the rise of the Donju and that capitalist class inside North Korea. So I think, yes, there is very much conspicuous consumption and a sense of progress inside North Korea for the elite who are allowed to access these things and have the money to access these things. I would say, though, that a lot of this still rests on men, and that it is the men who travel to China generally for work. Whether they are diplomats or traders or what have you, and they are the ones who generally go to Zara and the other places in North Korea where people are in China, sorry, where they're bringing back like shopping lists of goods. And defectors, high-level defectors, have talked about this, about being going out with lists for sportswear and things like that for people to wear at home. So men are playing a crucial role in that. But I do think that overall this is about showing that they can no longer show that North Korea is morally superior, or they've given up on that line of narrative in many ways, but they're trying to show that North Korea is just keeping up with the progress in the rest of the world. It's kind of a rambling answer to your question, but I hope that makes sense.
All right, so we have a question from Kenneth Deklava, which Anna, if you would respond first, and then Ken. He says, do you see the roles of women changing due to loyalty, aspiration, and generational change, or are there other psychological factors at play with regard to Kim Jong Un? Anna?
Hi, Ken. I think, I mean, far be it for me to tell you anything about North Korea, Ken. But I think that, that this is very much about generational change, the next generation, that, just like I said, the sense of progress that is happening in North Korea, and Kim Jong Un's efforts to try to show that the system is strong but changing and able to keep up with modern times, that the system has a future, a modern future, and, that will be perpetuated. So I think this is all part of that, but also, again, part of responding to the fact that so many people have seen that the outside world, that its neighbors, China, South Korea, are getting richer, are getting modernized, are modernizing, and that North Korea needs to keep up. So this is not, again, out of care for the people or a wish to give people a better lives. I think it is aimed at especially the elite of North Korea, the Pyongyang residents, of showing them that they can live a good life and a modern life in North Korea, and that they can have all of the mod cons and the kind of power in Pyongyang that they would not have, the status that they would not have if they were living in Seoul or Suwon.
Ken?
Focusing on within the leadership, this is a loyalty issue. Largely, it's a familial issue, but it's also, I think, these women, especially people like Choe Son Hui, sees this as an opportunity. If this regime is more tied to the familial and the Paektu bloodline, their role in that regime or their opportunities within that regime are probably going to be greater than if this is a military first regime or something like that. So they're seeing the opportunity to make the rise. Now, within the larger North Korean leadership, we've actually seen a decline in the number of women within the upper bodies like Central Committee and Supreme People's Assembly and things like that. But when you're talking about the elite around Kim and the roles that they're playing, this is issue about family and loyalty.
All right. Speaking of individuals, I'd like to digress here for a moment. Choe Son Hui. This is someone with whom I first interacted in 2002, my first trip to the North, 7 days. She was my guide. Through the years, I've been amazed to watch her career trajectory. She seems to have done quite well in a number of positions throughout her time in the DPRK. A question I have for both of you, we'll start with Ken. In your assessment, especially after the Hanoi situation, where Kim Jong Un departed, quite unhappy, humiliated, etc., Ken, is it your assessment that today that Choe, as foreign minister, would she be pro-engagement with the U.S. at this point, as she has been at some times in the past? Or do you think she's gone the other direction and is fully invested in Russia from a personal context, aside from whatever KJU may want?
Yeah, I think that, well, yeah, I mean, it really is circumstance dependent. Right now, I would say if you were sitting in the room with her, that she would probably make the argument that this is no time to engage with the United States. That doesn't mean that she doesn't somewhere down the line see the opportunity and doesn't discount the idea that it might be a good idea sometime down the line to engage with the U.S. But right now, making sure that that Russia relationship is particularly solid, that the opening up more and building on the relationship with China is much more solid, I think is something that she has been given the mandate to do. And I think that she's going to follow through on that. Really, if anything toward the U.S. changes, it'll come from Kim himself. I don't think you have Choe Son Hui sitting there trying to make the argument, hey, it's time that we try to pivot back to the United States. I don't think that's the way it will happen. I think it will be once Kim is satisfied that he either needs to go there or is allowed to go there because of, the fact that we kind of toss out the whole idea of denuclearization, and we're willing to meet him on a one-to-one basis, more on a level playing field. He probably doesn't see that as existing right now. So that really is probably outside the bounds of conversation for right now. Doesn't mean that once Trump finishes what he's going to do in Iran, tries to engage with the Chinese, then at some point that might come back into play. And especially if anything dramatic happens in Ukraine that starts to wind that down, where he thinks that he needs to really seriously think about re-engaging with the U.S. Otherwise, I think they'll probably keep on in a straight line. And I think that Choe Son Hui will follow that to the letter.
Anna?
Yeah, I would note that Choe Son Hui is, I mean, she's obviously very good at her job and she's risen up through this system, but she too has familial connections into the regime. Her stepfather, I think it was, has held several very high-level positions within the party. So she also has that very good pedigree that shows her loyalty, her investment in the survival of the regime. And so it's not like it's not a meritocratic system necessarily. She has risen up and been given these advantages because of her family connections to this regime. I would also note that she took over as foreign minister after quite a quick succession of several men who were deemed not to have done the job, and that she has provided continuity during this period. And I think it's probably quite helpful to American policymakers that they do know her so well, that she has been so integral to rounds of diplomatic talks over decades. And that, yeah, she's a known quantity for them and somebody they can deal with. I think that the focus on Russia is less about her personal preferences or affinities here, but as a reflection of the circumstances. We are living in a very different world from 2018, 2019, and it's clear that Kim Jong Un feels he doesn't need Donald Trump. He doesn't need the United States anymore. He is not desperate to talk to him, or like desperate for that kind of legitimacy that the summits in Singapore and Hanoi conferred onto him, and the wave of other leadership summits that triggered in terms of Xi Jinping and Moon Jae-in at the time, that he now has this strong relationship with Putin. Putin is giving him political sustenance, as well as who knows what kind of technological know-how and help. And so he is getting the diplomatic, economic, political support that he needs from Putin, and is able to ignore in many ways the Trump administration. So I think that is the really big shift from the previous period, and maybe one that Trump hasn't quite clocked. I mean, he has been quite distracted, but he's still, the fact that he has been out there talking about wanting or being open to meeting with Kim Jong Un, whereas Kim Jong Un has been more circumspect about it and talking about the conditions for that, shows just how the dynamics have changed, and that the Kim regime has really been thrown a lifeline by Putin in terms of the help that they were able to provide with regards to Ukraine.
All right. Our next question is from Karita Reed, who happens to be an alumni of our Knowing North Korea program in CNK. Her question is, do we have an idea of why Kim Jong-un may not be attending a foreign school like Kim Jong-un? External security environment, insecurity within the party, concerns of risk, et cetera, et cetera. Why is this the case? Ken?
I think one, it is a reflection that North Korea is not focusing on the West right now, but I think more importantly, it is when Kim Jong-nam and Kim Yo Jong and Kim Jong-un were studying in Switzerland, it really was not known. I mean, the intelligence communities and things kind of had an idea they might be out there, but it was easy to keep them under wraps. Very hard to do now. I don't think that they would feel very comfortable with her being, in a very vulnerable kind of position where she could be spied upon or maybe even approached. But also, I think that there is a real concern, that they want to make sure that if a succession has to be put in place, that she is inside the country when that happens. That will unfold fairly quickly. And if she were in Switzerland when all of this happened, I mean, it'd be an immediate tipper if all of a sudden she, in the middle of a semester, jumped on a plane, headed back to Korea for no apparent reason. So there are a variety of reasons, I think, that they don't want her to study abroad, or at least that's what we understand. And I think that, they're going to probably try to give her as good an education as they can inside North Korea, and really kind of learning at the knee of her father. One of the things that we've heard from defector sources is that the Kim Jong-un who is an early bird and starts his day, probably around 6 o'clock in the evening, if he doesn't have to go out on inspections or things. And the one person who's often in the room with him is his daughter when he is communicating with the frontline commanders and things like that. So she's kind of learning at the foot of her father about what it means to be a supreme leader, something you're not going to learn in Switzerland. So if they're having to fix her up pretty quick and give her an accelerated education and what it means to be an authoritarian leader 101, she probably needs to be inside the country.
Anna?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Ken just said there. I think the sending the children overseas has come with risks. Like Ken said, first of all, it would be impossible to do now in terms of surveillance. They would be under such scrutiny. And when we think about how Kim Jong Un's mother used to come and go on a North Korean plane to Switzerland to visit the children, impossible to think of Ri Sol-ju with her profile doing that now, even in famously discreet Switzerland. But also the risks that came with the people who did accompany the children to Switzerland. And especially here, we're talking about the aunt and uncle who then defected to the United States. And so the intelligence, the insights that they may have been able to give the US is obviously a risk for the regime as well. But also, I think Kim Jong Un did not have a great time at school in Switzerland. He found it very difficult. He was an outsider. He struggled with language. He hung out with the other immigrant children. He had difficulty making friends. So I would say he probably thought he didn't want to put. This is me imagining his thought process here, but that he did not want to put his own children through that process, but instead keep them closer to home and have a more of a normal family upbringing as far as they could there. So I think that was probably a factor in it as well. But also, like Ken says, if he's preparing her for succession at a young age, she needs to be there with him, and her most important schooling is happening with him.
All right. So Ken, Kathy Moon asks, how likely is the possibility of Kim Yo Jong as regent and Kim Jong-un as the anointed from the perspective of the military establishment and security apparatus? Do we know of any real links between Kim Yo Jong and these sectors?
I think that what you will have will be a regent structure. And you will have the military represented there. You'll have the party represented there. You'll have the Kim family represented there, and probably the technocracy, and then Kim Jong Un would be not Kim Jong Un, Kim Jong-un would be the supreme leader. Taking it kind of step by step, they will probably institute a Tuesday, Friday type of meeting to kind of get her up to speed. I think early on, Kim Yo Jong, probably in combination with some of the premier military advisors that are close to the Kim family, would be making the day-to-day decisions. Kim Jong-un would be informed about that. This is where the tension potentially between Kim Yo Jong and Ri Sol-ju might begin, as Kim Yo Jong may try to, potentially could overstep her bounds in terms of decision-making process. And Ri Sol-ju is going to try to make sure that her daughter is not threatened in any sort of way in terms of her legitimacy as a leader. Her personal relationships with the military are the things that she's building now in military parades and inspections and things like that. We don't know, what military leaders she's particularly close to, but we have seen a lot of deference given to her. We've seen her reaching out and actually walking away from Kim and having a conversation with a general who looks very nervous in the fact that what am I supposed to do here? The fact she's talking to me, so she is probably being encouraged, and the military is being encouraged to get to know her. She doesn't have the benefits. I mean, when Kim Jong-un came in, he leveraged a lot of his aunt, Kim Jong-un's patronage system within the military. And then he later co-opted that patronage system. I suspect that he's trying to build on that to help build some sort of military support around Kim Jong-un, but we just haven't seen enough. And she's still very young about how that relationship building would be taking place at this point in time between 14, 13, 14, I think about 14-year-old girl and men who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s. It's kind of hard to see how you bridge that gap. But I suspect that there are some people that are acting as go-betweens to help her build that relationship.
Anna?
Well, notwithstanding the fact that I'd already disclosed I've been wrong about everything else, I just can't see how this could happen. That how this military apparatus, these generals could tolerate or report to a teenage girl chaperoned or like guided by a 30-something woman. This is a very patriarchal system. Uh, the risk in a authoritarian regime like this is always of military coup or some kind of takeover. I could absolutely see a situation where the military tried to seize control if Kim Jong Un was no longer on the scene. And I find it really difficult to envisage a situation where Kim Joo-ae could take over and be able, even with Kim Yo Jong's tutelage, to be able to keep a grip on this system. So that, I mean, I'm willing to be proven wrong again, of course, but I just can't see how that would play out. And in fact, in any country, how a decorated military general with medals would defer to or respect the idea of that a teenage girl was now his boss.
And Anna is absolutely right. And the one institution that has pushed back against hereditary succession from day one, back in the 1970s when Kim became heir apparent and so on, Kim Jong-il became heir apparent, has been the military. So what I was trying to describe was basically, this is how I think they're trying to build something. Is it sustainable? That's a big question. And I suspect the only way they would survive it is to have massive purges if anybody pops their head up. And that would be critical for her to be able to establish some sort of control over the military. But it will be difficult, no doubt about it, if it happens within the next few years.
All right, so for our final question, it's Richard Kessler. Richard asks, I wonder how different the regime is from similar regimes where you have family-based leadership. Seems ripe for comparison, for comparative analysis. Ken?
I think there are some similarities. I mean, there are some unique aspects of North Korea in terms of their Juche philosophy and things like that are unique. But in terms of the dynamics, as I've always said, if you are trying to understand North Korea, don't study international affairs or bureaucratic theory or any of that stuff. It's not going to help you much. Watch I, Claudius, from the 1970s, that British thing about the last Caesars and things like that. Really kind of shows you how a family dynamic can really transform or really control an empire. Or in this case, North Korea, it really starts with the family dynamics and then kind of spreads out from there. So I think there are probably some similarities. You would have to actually identify the country for me to be able to say whether there's a lot of comparison between those particular two countries. Also, very useful. Go back and study the Stalin period in terms of the key families within the Kremlin itself that was very close to Stalin and his family. Will kind of give you a sense about how these families interact with each other on a very personal level. And I think that's something worth trying to understand if you're trying to understand North Korean dynamics.
Anna?
I think it is ripe for comparative analysis, and somebody should write a book about that, maybe Ken. I think the North Korean system is very different from others, as Ken said, and that this is a communist dynasty. Has been the only one. Even Cuba was not passing down in the same way. So it is has its own very unique system there. My movie recommendation is The Death of Stalin by Armando Iannucci, which I thought was just great at capturing the ridiculousness of the succession and the infighting in these systems. Obviously fiction to some extent. I think the thing that's happened most recently that has caught my eye is in Iran and the ascension of Khamenei's son, Mojtaba, to take over the leadership when the previous supreme leader, his father, had actively spoken against dynastic succession and saying that that was not the right system for Iran. So the fact that Iran Iran is a very different country from North Korea, but maybe they do see some precedent in a way at times of trouble to be handing down to somebody with the same last name. That's
All
my
right.
hot take.
Thank you, Anna. So Anna and then Ken, any final remarks? Is there any topic that you'd like to comment on that we've not already covered? Anna?
No, I think just the fact that again we are looking at another potential leader in North Korea with so little information, and the advantage that North Korea has in being able to collect and analyze and build dossiers on other countries that we just cannot do about them. So we are talking about, the number of times that Ken and I have said I don't know, or the things that we just cannot know at this stage shows that how little progress we've made in terms of being able to understand and get inside this millennial nuclear armed regime. And I thank you very much for the invitation today, Keith.
I'm paying very close attention to what North Korea's takeaways from the attempted decapitation of the Iranian regime and what North Korea may think about dispersion of authority down the chain of command. They've already been doing this really since about 2015. But whether they begin to do some other things related to this, they're creating some new units and things that I think might be useful for this type of endeavor if there was ever an attempt at a decapitation. So that'd be something I'm kind of paying attention to. But again, it's all guesswork right now, trying to connect the dots. In terms of good books to read that are not about North Korea but can help you understand the whole kind of family dynamic thing, is Stalin in the Court of the Red Tsar by Simone Sebag Montefiore. Is an excellent book. It really kind of gets the people that are in the court around the leader and how they interact and how their interactions really kind of have an impact on decision making and policy.
Well, it's interesting, the repeated reference here to Stalin. Both of you are aware that when Kim Jong Un assumed power, he spent a considerable amount of time studying his grandfather's relationship with Stalin, right? And he was quite curious about that background as well as the interaction between the DPRK and Russia, the Soviet Union, and so on. Well, thank you. This has been a tremendous program. From an NCNK perspective, we're really honored that both of you would be here today. You each bring so much to this topic and to contribute to the national discourse on the DPRK. So thank you. Thanks to those who are attending. And I'd like to thank my colleagues, Marissa McPherson and Seth Joyner. And with that, have a good rest of your day. Take care.